HBO documentary premiering at this year's Sundance Film Festival follows 3 public defenders in states like Georgia that fight the odds to provide their clients with quality representation. This is a clip from the film Gideon's Army that explains just what's at stake.
This is the way it really works. You go to jail. You're charged with an offense based upon what a police officer thinks you did. They set a bond, and if you're poor and you can't make the bond, you don't get out. So you sit, and you sit, and you sit. You may have lost your house. Your kids may be needing sustenance. You may have been taken out of high school. All the things that could happen if you were summarily plucked from your life. You have so much tremendous pressure to plead guilty. It's all about lessening the penalty.
That's an excerpt from the film's title, Gideon's Army, which refers to the landmark Supreme Court case Gideon v. Wainwright in 1963, which will have its 50th anniversary this March. The case involved Clarence Earl Gideon, a poor man from Florida who was convicted of breaking into a pool hall. He couldn't afford a lawyer. None was provided for him when he asked for one at trial. In its decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Gideon, finding state courts are required under the Sixth Amendment to provide a lawyer in criminal cases for defendants unable to afford their own. I want to play an audio recording from the Supreme Court's oral arguments. This is from the very end of the hearing, when Chief Justice Earl Warren addressed Abe Fortas, the attorney arguing the case, who is himself a future Supreme Court justice.
Mr. Fortas, before you sit down, I should like to say this. This is a very important case. It's a very fundamental case. It's important to the state of Florida, the state of Alabama, and the other states that have that same rule. It's important to thousands and thousands of poor litigants throughout our country.
That an excerpt from the oral arguments in the Supreme Court 50 years ago. We're joined right now by the filmmakers of Gideon's Army. Well, the filmmaker, Gideon's Army, which premiered at this year's Sundance Film Festival. Dawn Porter is with us. And we're also joined by one of the lawyers that she profiles in this film, Travis Williams, a public defender in Hall County, Georgia. Welcome to Democracy Now! Dawn, talk about why you made this film.
I am a lawyer, and I'd gone to the South I'd met Jonathan Rapping, who is the head of the Southern Public Defender Training Center, and saw the training that was happening in the South for young lawyers. And I was really struck by this group of committed young public defenders who were trying to kind of change the way public defense is practiced in the United States. And I just thought their story wasn't known, and that people would be interested in seeing what was happening.
I mean, the figures are astounding. The U.S. has the largest imprisoned population in the world, what, 2 million people?
2.3 to 2.5.
2.3 to 2.5.
Yes.
The oral arguments we just heard, talk about their significance and what this ruling, the right to counsel in a criminal case, has meant.
You know, I think we are, as Americans, we are so familiar with the phrase, you have the right to an attorney, that we think it's something that originated with the Constitution. It's actually only 50 years old. So that Supreme Court ruling was incredibly important. I'm so glad that you played that clip. I'm a lawyer. You know, I remember in constitutional law learning about that case. The Gideon decision, Gideon was an indigent person who wrote from prison a handwritten letter to the Supreme Court and said, this isn't fair. And the Supreme Court not only agreed, but they agreed in a unanimous opinion that this is fundamental to the Bill of Rights. And Abe Fortas argued the case, a preeminent Washington, D.C. lawyer, went on to the Supreme Court. It was remarkable jurisprudence, but you know what we're seeing now is that remarkable decision has not been implemented, has not been as effectual as its importance.
I want to go to another of the clips in Gideon's Army. This is Brandy Alexander, a public defender in Georgia, discussing the case of one of her young clients.
He is a kid, and he's facing a lot of time. If he's found guilty, it will break him. Mentally and emotionally, he'll be broken. I cannot fathom turning around to his mother after a jury has said guilty, and I've told her he's gonna get 10 years, at least, at minimum. She says he's done like a complete 180. He has a job, he's working on his GED, apparently he has this girlfriend. So I think that he's been scared straight, assuming he gets a not guilty verdict and is allowed to live his life. And here's hoping that that's the end result. And we don't see happily ever afters very much in this profession, but hopefully we get us a happily ever after.
Dawn Porter, tell us about Brandy Alexander.
Brandy is a remarkable young woman. She grew up in the South, in a low-income neighborhood, saw a lot of her friends be arrested, and decided she was going to be a lawyer in order to help them. So she's a really empathetic person. She almost feels too much, and I think that I wanted to profile her because I think she breaks the stereotype of the uncaring public defender. Brandy's issue is she cares too much, and so if you care so deeply about what happens, it can really, eat you up inside.
It sounds like there's someone else who cares a great deal sitting right next to you, Travis Williams. Why did you become a public defender in Georgia?
I wanted to, I think it's different types of people that do this work, and I'm a fighter. And so I really became a public defender to fight the system, to make sure the police are held accountable, to make sure that the court system is held accountable, to make justice work.
You could make a lot more money as a private attorney. Why aren't you doing it?
I didn't have a lot of money, so I think I'm doing pretty good now. So I'm happy.
Where do you work in Georgia?
In Hall County, Georgia. It's about an hour northeast of Atlanta.
How many cases do you have?
Well, I handle mostly level 1 felonies, rapes, child molestations, things like that. So my numbers are a little lower than other people's, but generally about 100. And
talk about who comes to you, how you're assigned to these cases.
Well, I'm a senior attorney, so I run a courtroom and I supervise about 3 or 4 different people. And so a case comes in, and let's say it's a murder or a child molestation, it comes directly to me. I work the case up from the beginning, and some of the lower level felonies go to my junior attorney, and we just kind of work the cases that way.
You are wearing a sweater. We're here in Park City, Utah, so people can't see something that's very significant about the way you decided to mark your wins and losses. Can you talk about it?
Well, my wins, they go on the wall. I frame them and I put them on the wall, all the verdict sheets.
The court decisions, the
yes,
verdict
all
sheets.
the verdict sheets, and I've gotten 5 reversals with the Court of Appeals, so I hang those on the wall too. But I decided that since the wins go on the wall, since I celebrate them so much, that the losses have to go somewhere. So I have a tattoo on my back that says "True Believer," and underneath that it says, "Without a belief held true, we cannot possibly hope to persuade." And then underneath that is the names of the last names of every case that I've lost.
How many names are on your back?
8.
So it hurts even more than the loss when you get these tattoos one by one.
Yes.
That's 8 cases out of how many?
Out of 24.
Wow, that's a pretty good ratio. When was the last time you had one tattooed on your back?
Last week. Last week.
Why are you doing this?
I'm doing this because I think that the system needs somebody that's enthusiastic about keeping it in check, because when I was growing up, I was always harassed by the police, whether it was right or wrong. And so I want to be able to keep them in check. And the only way to do that is through zealous representation.